convene around 5:01.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, I see confirmation that we are recording. All set to go, Lori?
Yep.
All right, good evening, everyone. The time is 5:03 p.m. The date is Wednesday, February 16th, and welcome to our regular East Bay Community Energy meeting. And we are, I'll just read a brief introduction that consistent with the provisions of Government Code 54953 as amended by Assembly Bill 361, East Bay Community Energy Board of Directors and Standing Committee meetings will be held via teleconference/video conference only during this current state of emergency. Any interested members of the public can participate via Zoom utilizing the link listed on the agenda or telephonically utilizing the dial-in information that was also listed on the agenda. And the agenda, as always, can be found at ebce.org. With that, I am going to turn things over to our clerk of the board, Lori, to take the roll, please.
Thank you, Diane. City of Albany. City of Livermore. Here. City of Piedmont. City of San Leandro.
Present.
City of Tracy.
Present.
Thank you. City of Oakland.
Here.
City of Emeryville.
Here.
City of Hayward.
Here.
City of Union City.
Here.
City of Berkeley.
Here.
City of Pleasanton. City of Fremont. City of Dublin.
I'm here. I just got to switch. This is Teresa from Fremont.
Oh, from Fremont. Thank you, Teresa. City of Dublin, are they present? No. City of Newark. Alameda County.
Present.
And non-voting member chair of the CAC. Non-present. We have 10 present, so we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And would you please permit the phone number ending in 8899? Can you promote that? That's Teresa Cox.
Oh, okay.
Entering on her cell phone. She's switching devices, right, Teresa?
I was I'll just note I was messaging with her directly. I don't see an option to actually make a phone number a panelist, but I did allow her to talk so that she can at least mute and unmute herself when she wants to speak up, but she may just have to interrupt a little bit to.
Very good. Yes, Teresa, if you you've got your hand raised right now, but use *9 to raise and lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute in the Zoom app on your phone. So great. Looks like she just lowered her hand. I think she's done this before. She's old hat. She knows what she's doing. Very good. Thank you. And that will take us to public comment. And this will be for items that are on the consent agenda and for items that are not listed on the agenda, but in the purview of this agency. Speakers will have 2 minutes. They must complete an electronic speaker slip as well. So I'll check in with the clerk of the board to see if anyone has submitted an electronic speaker slip.
Not for public comments.
Okay, I do see a hand raised. I will recognize the speaker, but please follow up afterwards and fill out that slip, and we'll take these speakers in order. First up is Alita Dupree. You will have 2 minutes.
Okay, so what happened here is I gave host.
I just unmuted Alita Dupree to be able to speak.
Okay, because I gave host to Nick, and so now I cannot manage the.
Well, it looks like Alita is not muted.
Yeah,
I don't.
I'm also a co-host, so I can help just manage that.
Alita, please, please commence your public comment.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. Chair Diane Martinez and members, Alita Dupree for a record. A clock would help. And I did send in the electronic speaker form. Hopefully you got it. But anyway, I just come to you again to hear about these important proceedings of our public power agency and service. And I think I'll start off speaking about storage. I've been thinking a lot about it lately, especially when, as we get into spring, there could be a lot of power curtailment. And we want to ask ourselves, what are the best methods of storage? I read a tidbit out there about some technical issues at a storage facility at Moss Landing. I'm not real privy to the details, but it's something that I'm sure is going around. But I think storage is essential for capturing the renewable kilowatt hours that would normally, unfortunately, be curtailed. Because it's not just about building to create new supply, but to be able to use that which is already available. So it's complex. And I simply speak to you as an ordinary user of residential electricity. And how can we look at having innovative rate design? I am using 100% solar power. And I also am on a demand plan, which helps me to be conscious of my draw as well as my volumetric usage. And these are things that can help me to save money by scheduling my use, especially around the temperatures, times of the day. So I look forward to hearing what we have to talk about tonight. And hopefully we can get our text set up, because I take your speaker forms very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Next up, we have Tom Kelly. Tom, you'll have 2 minutes. And can someone let Tom know when he is?
I have allowed Tom to speak, so you should be able to.
Very good.
Tom, can you?
Tom, I think you'll have to unmute yourself on your end.
Let me see.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, I have 3 comments I'd like to make. The first is on the value and relevance of public comment. You know, for the past 4 months, I've been trying to get the CAC to raise the issue of the 2020 emissions intensity for Bright Choice. And it's only tonight that we're receiving a presentation that has more to do with the future than the past. Many of us who spent years of our lives fighting for the development of a CCA did so because we felt a CCA would be much more responsive to reducing carbon emissions in PG&E. The point I'm trying to make here is that public input is meaningless if it results in silence from the recipient of the comment. To make public comment meaningful, perhaps a staff member could be assigned to respond in writing to the commenter. At least then you'd have a sense of whether you were being heard, and there might actually be a chance that something would happen as a result. Second thing, I'd like to suggest that criteria be established for the source of financing that is associated with new power projects. Now that EBCE has a credit rating, we'll see new sources of project financing. We have criteria for labor, some sensitivity to location. Why shouldn't we also screen for financing? EBCE did so when they went out for their first funding with Barclays, and I think that should be something that's done in the future. And finally, what is the status of the PCIA and PG&E territory? I ask because in SCE territory, it's reported that it will drop by 70% next month, allowing even the 100% renewable customers in that in the Clean Power Alliance to to get that power at a rate that's cheaper than SCE's default product. So I appreciate an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Colleagues, next up is the consent agenda. Colleagues, are there any questions or any items to pull off of the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I'm seeing some back and forth in the chat box about a few directors who would like to be promoted. Just want to make sure that they can participate in the consent calendar.
Absolutely, thank you. So let's see, staff, are you aware that there appears to be an alternate for Aaron Tiedemann in Albany, who is calling in from a number ending in 9660? Can they be added? And then can we demote our public speaker? And I'll remind those board members who are calling in that you raise your hand with the *9 and you unmute yourself with *6. And feel free to just pipe in if you have any questions, if I'm not noticing your raised hand. And then do we have Connor McCarthy? Yeah, it looks like Connor McCarthy has been promoted. So is that's everyone, correct, who's trying to get in? All right, great. So colleagues, back to the consent agenda. Does anyone have anything to pull or have any clarifying questions for staff? Okay, and as we have already had public comment for the consent agenda, is there a motion on the consent agenda? I recognize Vice Chair Lopez.
Thank you. I move the consent agenda, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a
Second. Yeah.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
City of Albany. City of Livermore.
Aye.
City of Piedmont.
Yes.
Piedmont is present, okay. City of San Leandro.
Yes.
City of Tracy.
Yes.
City of Oakland. City of Emeryville.
Yes.
City of Hayward.
Yes.
City of Union City.
Yes.
City of Berkeley.
Yes.
City of Pleasanton. Are they present?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Uh-huh.
City of Fremont.
Yes.
City of Dublin. Still absent. City of Newark. Absent. Alameda County.
Aye.
Passes by unanimous vote of those present. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I'll just remind members of the public that we will be taking public comment on items for which there's deliberation. If there's an information item that we are simply accepting, I may choose not to have public comment at that time. So first up is our CEO report, item 9.
Right, thank you. Okay. So we interesting. From a committee perspective, we actually have a finance administration and procurement committee meeting on Friday. Our last MRL committee was earlier in February. We do have 2 new staff. Oh gosh, okay. Huh. That we are excited to say, David Lubin and Kate Cady. David is joining us as a business account manager, and Kate Cady is joining the public engagement and outreach team, where she's going to be focused on working with city staff in particular, and working with a group that we fondly call our municipal pals, or muni pals. So, welcome, David and Kate. On the Brilliant 100 closure, this is something we've been regularly providing an update on. So this is some content you all will know, but the Brilliant 100 product is no longer available to customers. It was closed as of January 1, 2022. And we do have our cities that are in the process of transitioning to renewable, 100% renewables. The cities of Albany, Dublin, and Hayward and Pleasanton are going through that process and have received their requisite notifications. Do you want to go to the bottom of this presentation? There's a table. So what you'll see here is as things currently stand, we're still seeing very, very low levels of incremental opt-out. Below 1% in all cases. While we are seeing, not insignificant numbers of customers choosing to opt down. That's very good. We want that ratio to be, when customers make a choice, they make the choice to retain their savings, but not opt out. So I think that's a number that we're very happy with and bodes well for future renewable 100 transitions that are going to be underway. First up being Berkeley. That is the CEO report for today.
Very good, thank you. Colleagues, any questions on the CEO report? All right, well, unless there's any objection, we will go ahead and accept that report. And as our Anna Olivia has joined us. So Anna Olivia, if you're ready, you are up to bat with the Community Advisory Committee report.
Apologies, I got on around 5:04. The Community Advisory Committee met on Monday. We had substantial technical difficulties and were not able to call that meeting to order until 6:26, I believe, almost a full half hour after we were supposed to start. Several community members gave up and did not participate although I have received several calls and emails from folks letting me know that they had planned on doing it and were feeling very frustrated by the process. And as were our other members, we did hold a fast forward meeting, adjourning only barely late, which was good. And in our meeting, we discussed two of the items that are on the agenda tonight. One is a motion and one is an informational item. And very specifically, we had asked last month that staff put the item that Tom Kelly has been raising around the cleanliness of the power mix onto our agenda for this month. As I assured him at the meeting last month, and staff was very good in actually deviating from their planned presentation to spend the first solid 15-20 minutes of that proposal explaining about the power mix and what was happening there. So we'd like to thank staff for that and assure Tom that we did in fact agendize the item and have a discussion about it, and that we are trying to be responsive. So there are some issues with alternates and attendance, but not a huge amount. And it's really lovely to have such a full and engaged board with good representation from most of the area. South County was not represented, neither members or alternates were able to attend last month. So do encourage your folks to be there, and thank you for giving us a really good CAC right now. So that is all.
Thank you. I'm sorry to hear about the technical difficulties, and I'm assured that those are being looked at. Colleagues, are there any questions for our CAC chair? Okay, thank you, Anna Olivia, for your report. It is received. Next up is item 11, and this is consideration regarding approval of legislative action on AB B1814, which would authorize CCAs to submit applications to the CPUC to receive funding to administer transportation electrification programs in their service areas. And I will kick it off to staff for a presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I would have a presentation for the legislative update, which includes our recommended bill position today on AB 1814. Also going to provide an update for you on some of the two-year bills based on where we ended last year and where we're at today. And I'll also provide an overview of this year's legislative calendar for you. Next, I think you can advance to one more slide, please. Thank you. So I did put together a memo recommending that the board take a support position on AB 1814. I will note that this bill is sponsored by CalCCA and has been recently introduced this month. The bill is actually fairly simple. Current statute requires the investor-owned utilities to file these applications for transportation electrification. However, one of the challenges we've had at the CPUC is that community choice aggregators are not expressly permitted to file similar applications and to be able to receive funding from distribution customers in the same way that the investor-owned utilities are. So this bill would fix that by not requiring, but enabling CCAs to also file applications. The CPUC would still be administering the program, and they would consider the applications from both CCAs and investor-owned utilities in deciding which applications have merit and should move forward. So given that this would enable CCAs like EVCE to access funding for transportation electrification programs, we would advise that the board take a support position on this bill. Chair, would you like me to go on with the presentation, the rest of the presentation?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. Oops, I think one more back.
I see, I went too far.
There we go. Oh, that was two.
Right. This
Perfect.
is the next one, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this slide shows our bill tracker from 2021, and I just highlighted the bills whose statuses have changed since our last update. The way that a two-year legislative cycle works, bills that have not moved out of their first house of origin by January 31st of this year, instead of being two-year bills, are considered bills that have died. So we have a few bills that we were following that are now in that category. AB 427 was a bill by Bauer Cahan. And I just note that because she is one of our legislators for our delegation. I will also note that AB 1139 was the bill that would have required a replacement NEM tariff that EVCE opposed, and that one died as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so in the Senate, we also saw a couple bills die. SB 99 is in the second house, but it's can be difficult for a two-year bill to move depending on where it gets stuck in its second house. And so Senator Dodd has actually released a new bill, SB 833, that is essentially the same bill. So we are continuing to monitor the new bill to see if we would like to take a support position on that as well. And then there are two other bills that are remaining in the second house for now, and it is unclear whether we'll see any movement. Next slide, please. So just to go over the key deadlines for 2022, again, it's the second year of a two-year legislative cycle. The governor submitted the budget on time, which had a deadline of January 10th. Bills had to have moved out of their first house, second year bills, by 1/31, which is why we now have some bills that have died. The bill introduction deadline, this is a very key date, is Friday. And so we will see new bills in print, most likely due to the President's Day weekend on the 22nd, which means the next month is going to be more exciting than this past month has been. And then from there, bills will move through both the first and second houses. I will note that the last day for each house to pass bills this year is August 31st. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps for EBCE's legislative staff, we are reviewing and analyzing all new bills and amendments and tracking the bills that were on our tracker from last year. So we will continue to develop a watch list and determine when it might make sense for EBCE to formally take a position. And if so, we will seek out approval via our process for taking a position on bills. And then once a position is taken, we will send in formal position letters. We're also monitoring the governor's budget request closely. And I'll point out that this year, the request includes $6.1 billion over 5 years for zero emission vehicles. So there's a lot in the budget that could be relevant to EBCE and what we're trying to do. And so we're taking a very close look at that. And then finally, we continue to engage very closely with CalCCA on legislative efforts. So that concludes my formal presentation today. Happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Melissa. Colleagues, with your indulgence, I'd like to call for public comment at this time, and I'll first check with our clerk to see if anyone has submitted any speaker cards on this item.
I do not have, I believe this is for emissions 2030. Howard, do you see that in there from Chris Gilbert?
This is item number 11 that we just covered. And so the 2 comments we have are for item 12. So we don't have anything.
Item 12, thank you.
Okay, but I will go ahead and recognize speakers with their hands raised via Zoom, beginning with Jessica Tovar. You will have 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Just a quick comment to say that we obviously support this bill and would like to see community choice programs have more in their purview, noting that in past, a lot of CPUC policies have actually reduced power that community choice programs can take. So we would like to see this be successful, and certainly want to see more of investments in cleaning up municipal fleets, public transportation. I remember in a letter that we submitted maybe a year or 2 ago, really kind of laid out all the different opportunities, including like paratransit, for example. And so, yeah, so obviously we support this, and we want to see this bill successful. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, speaker. Next up, we have Alita Dupree.
Just before I call a comment, Lori, can you promote Sean Kumagai, another one of our board members from the attendees, to be a panelist? Or, you know, I could probably do it.
I just did.
I'm doing it. Promoted. Sean, you're promoted.
Let me reset. Okay.
Got it. Good. Good.
All right, speaker Alita Dupree, you have 2 minutes.
Right. Thank you again, Chair Diane Martinez. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her. I'm getting in my speaker cards pretty quick. It makes it easier for all of you. I did hear this at the Community Advisory Committee, and I mentioned the importance of this and the support for it I'd like to see, because when it comes to electrification of vehicles, I've always been behind the curve. I've never owned my own real estate, even when I did have a car. And now I don't have a car. And because I don't own my own real estate, charging has always been an issue. And even though we have fast charging in various public places, there aren't very many of those fast charging units. And being able to charge at home will allow you to draw the energy at a lower rate of demand. But also for me as a person who doesn't have a car, and there are many who don't drive, I want this to advocate also for the public transportation, for our city buses and paratransit vehicles and other various vehicles that carry passengers, and also our freight vehicles. There's a lot of traffic in and out of Port of Oakland, and delivery vans and vehicles that can bring me my food and groceries. So I want to see this bill advocate for an expansive definition of electrification, because there is equity in this. We have to remember those who don't have the real estate or their own vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other hands raised, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And colleagues, I'll bring it back for questions and discussion on this item. And remember, we got the whole legislative update as well as consideration of AB 1814. So first up, we are going to hear from Anna Olivia Eldred, Chair of the CAC.
Thank you. This is just to give the CAC's recommendation on this item. We did have a vote that passed all in favor with one abstention, that the board supports staff's recommendation of a position in favor. And just to give that before we go into discussion.
Very good. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Member Kalb from Oakland.
Hi, I'm happy to make a motion that we officially support the bill. 1814, was that?
Correct.
Yeah, it seemed like a no-brainer. Happy to support it. Thank you.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Member Kalb, a second by Member Monroe. Colleagues, any more discussion on the legislative update or our recommend position? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you. City of Albany, City of Livermore,
Yes.
City of Piedmont,
Yes.
City of San Leandro,
Aye.
City of Tracy,
Yes.
City of Oakland,
Aye.
City of Emeryville,
Aye.
City of Hayward,
Yes.
City of Union City,
Yes.
City of Berkeley,
Yes.
City of Pleasanton,
Yes.
City of Fremont,
Yes.
City of Dublin.
Aye.
Oh, you arrived, okay. City of Newark, absent. County of Alameda,
Aye.
passes by unanimous vote of those in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I'm sure you noted because she voted, but our member from Pleasanton has joined us.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Colleagues, that will bring us to item 12. This is power content guidelines, zero emission 2030. And I will hand it over to staff for a presentation.
Jim?
Yep. Good evening, Chair Martinez, members of the board, hello, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Nope, not the right
Nope.
one.
Not the right one.
It's item 12 on there.
Let's see here. Past emissions, okay. 1 second. It's coming up.
That's the one. Thank you so much. Can you please go to the next slide? Okay, so we'll start with giving a little bit of background. At the December 2020 board meeting, a clean energy goal was adopted And this was part of the IRP, the Integrated Resource Planning proceedings for that year. And so staff ran analysis and presented scenarios to the board, and they elected to establish a target of zero emission electricity in 2030. This is an ambitious goal that has EBCE 15 years ahead of the state's target of carbon neutrality in 2045. Yeah, and so the board adopted this goal, and so staff spent time between them kind of preparing guidance on how to get to that point. Next slide, please. So again, staff is presenting this item as informational. There's not a vote involved. We're not asking for anything to be adopted here, but the board established a target for 2030, and so we are presenting a path to get there. In constructing this, there's different goals that we included to try to reach that point. The first and most obvious is using the board adopted 2030 target as an endpoint. So building from current through 2030. The other is to include annual reductions in the plan-wide emissions and those emissions associated with Bright Choice. So every year leading to 2030, the emissions would drop. And then the third is to continue to have Bright Choice exceed the California RPS renewable percent. Next slide, please. So now we're actually looking at the guidance that staff is presenting here, again, only as informational. And I'll kind of walk through what we have here in the table. And so what we're looking at is, oh, I think you went one slide too many, Lori. Can you go back one, please? Oh, maybe not. No, you're good. Sorry. And so what we're looking at here are those annual steps, and these are soft targets to get us to a zero emission electricity in 2030. What's included here is the historical data, which is in the dark gray for all of our plans and for Bright Choice. And so to illustrate what all plans is, this is the aggregate of all of our sales, regardless of product. And so for 2018 and 19, that is the total amount of renewable that was purchased and the total amount of sales for those years. Mostly this is driven by Bright Choice due to that high enrollment of that in the historical years. And so we're looking at, again, historical renewable percent as actuals, and then also forward-looking those steps to reach zero emission electricity in 2030. And so we're showing both the renewable content and the carbon-free content in this picture here. I do want to point out that, in building this, we construct them as soft targets. And so we see specific percentages for renewable and carbon-free here, but we know that, there are limitations to the availability of carbon-free resource from large hydro by years. And so again, it's built as guidance instead of firm targets. And so alongside the all plans percentages, we have those associated with the Bright Choice plan, including the historical performance of that. And then on the column to the far right, we have the California RPS amounts there, both historical and then those moving forward. And we see that the path to zero emission electricity shows the proposed or the shown RPS percentage for Bright Choice exceeding that by at least 5% early on and up to as much as 15% in the year 2030. The chart to the right is just a visual representation of the data in the table, depending on how you like to look at numbers. Next slide, please. Okay. So here it's the same data from the previous one, but now we've brought in PG&E's base plan content. So again, the all plans and Bright Choice renewable and carbon-free percents are presented there. But now we're showing the historical comparison of the Bright Choice plan to PG&E. And so these are actual performance of their base plan relative to Bright Choice and all plans. And then the middle column for the PG&E base plan is the combination of their renewable and large hydro, which is a proxy for their carbon-free. And the reason we include this is because PG&E does have high carbon-free content, but the majority of it is made up of their nuclear, if you take the renewable out. And since EBCE only populates its carbon-free with large hydro for the everything that's not renewable, is that it's a better comparison for the carbon-free content of our plans in using this metric. So the PG&E plan is broken into 3 columns: the renewable plus large hydro, and then their nuclear content. And then again, displayed to the right is the California RPS. So this is just showing Bright Choice's performance relative to PG&E and how we've been dictating the renewable percent for Bright Choice. Next slide, please. Okay. So, when we talk about emissions and we talk about content, these are intertwined, but we do need to spend some time, as was pointed out from public comment in the CEC, discussing emissions and how we calculate them and what we do. And this slide kind of illustrates that, but I'll kind of speak to it because it gets pretty confusing quickly. Actually, is a better slide. Anyway, I'll speak to this. So in 2018 and 19, in establishing our emissions metric, we use the climate registry, which is abbreviated as the TCR here. And so the climate registry is a widely accepted emissions calculation and reporting method and institution that EBCE used in 18 and 19, and so did many of our other CCAs, and PG&E and the IOUs also use it. So it's a well-regarded way for calculating emissions and for being able to report them as well. Starting in 2020, the Power Source Disclosure Report regulations changed to include emission reporting to only be done through the power content label and through the Power Source Disclosure Report, which is abbreviated in future tables as PSDR. And so the biggest change to this is that the basis for calculating emissions is kind of three-pronged in my mind. There are components of your content, which is, to me, is purchased power that carry emissions. Even some renewable geothermal has emissions as well, and not applicable to EBCE, but there's natural gas that is in some portfolio that has emissions as well. But then there's unspecified power content. And so what this really is you have to think about this in kind of a power content standpoint, is this is unpurchased sales within our portfolio. And so the example I gave the CAC that hopefully resonated was that, if you picture you have 100 megawatt hours of sales and you bought 50 megawatt hours of renewable, and that's all you got, then you would have 50 megawatt hours of unpurchased sales for that year. And those 50 megawatts would have a corresponding emission factor relative to the grid unspecified amount. And so EBCE for our plans do not purchase natural gas. We don't purchase unspecified power, but it's more the balance or the netting of what we have purchased in our retail sales by plan. So that's kind of both the TCR and PSDR use this kind of unspecified power methodology, which again isn't purchased, but just the net of purchase energy and sales. And it's pretty confusing. Hopefully I did a good job of explaining it. So now I'm going to step forward to the differences between the PSDR and the TCR. So again, the Climate Registry TCR we used in 2018 and 2019. The Power Source Disclosure Report and those associated regulations kicked in for us starting in 2020. And the biggest difference is that now through the Power Source Disclosure Report, the PSDR regulations, is we're now reporting emissions associated with PCC2 RECs. And so in the TCR, we did not report any emissions that are associated with these projects or with these products. And so what are PCC2 RECs? We've written about this pretty extensively in the reports, but still a very confusing subject. And so these are, typically renewable projects that are located outside of the state. And so they generate renewable electricity that's consumed within the Western area, but are not injected into California. And so it's a renewable project, it's out of state, the renewable energy is created. But when we purchase these products, at the same time, the sellers are then providing alternative energy injected into California. And this could be carbon-free energy, it could be grid unspecified from the Northwest. But the PSDR regulations require us to report an unspecified amount of emissions for those PCC2 RECs. So these are products that we use for RPS purposes. They're deemed renewable, but for every PCC2 REC we buy, we will have a corresponding amount of emissions relative to that amount of unspecified. And so just to kind of wrap all this really confusing stuff up, so the TCR and the the TCR and the PSDR are two ways of calculating emissions, and the biggest difference is that the PSDR includes emissions associated with those PCC2 RECs. So I know that's a lot. I kind of try to add a lot here because I know people are asking a lot about emissions. So apologies if I made it more confusing than it is, but that's kind of emissions 101 there in a nutshell. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're actually looking at these emissions. And so we go back to what we're originally talking about here, which is our path to zero emission electricity in 2030. And so we mentioned that we used the TCR in 2018 and 19. And then started reporting emissions to the PSDR in 2020, and we'll do so also for 2021's generation. And so what we see here in this table are simulated emissions under both methodologies. And so even in 2018 and 19, we show that the PSDR amount is significantly higher than that of the TCR. But we also see an increase in the emissions in 2020 in both senses. And that has less to do with the methodology, even though now we are reporting emissions through the PSDR regulations, but has a lot to do with how we changed the plan design of Bright Choice starting in 2020, when we chose not to take the nuclear allocation from PG&E and then to change the design of Bright Choice to be able to keep that at cost parity and keep that still a renewable product. And so we transition from having Bright Choice be a heavily carbon-free product to having it be able to exceed the renewable content of PG&E. And that was a plan design, but with that, it also increased the emissions for Bright Choice and therefore increased our plan-wide emissions as well. And so starting in 2020 and 2021 and beyond, we'll be reporting through the PSDR. And these would be the associated emissions using that method through the planning horizon of this presentation. And so again, as mentioned back on slide 2, we talk about the goals. You know, we have a board adopted target of zero emission electricity in 2030. And we work to gradually reduce those emissions year over to get to zero emission electricity in 2030. Next slide, please. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but again, to summarize, and again, apologies for the deviations in path here, but you know, the board adopted a zero emission electricity target for 2030. This is a board adopted item that was built through the IRP process. And that's informational only. We're presenting, you know, a path to get there that kind of includes the goals that were mentioned above, with the primary one being zero emission electricity in 2030. But including in that is annual increases in both renewable and carbon-free % year over. And then the big one is having Bright Choice continue to exceed the RPS over that planning horizon. Next slide, please. And that's it. So if there's any questions.
Great, thank you, Jim. I'm actually going to ask for public comment first. I know we have 2 submitted speaker cards at least on this item. So I will leave it to our clerk to call folks in order. And if you're joining us via Zoom, use the raise hand feature to be recognized. Or if you're calling in, you can press *9.
You want the ones with hands raised first?
Let's take the ones that were submitted electronically first, please.
Lori, I'll note the two speaker cards that we have are from Richard Rollins and Chris Gilbert. So perhaps we'll do Richard Rollins first and then Chris Gilbert after that. Although Richard Rollins does not have his hand raised, so maybe we'll do.
His hand is raised now, Howard.
Okay, great. Okay, Richard, you should be able to speak.
Okay, I'm assuming that you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Again, my name is Richard Rollins and I live in Berkeley. I want to speak about the power content guidelines report that Jim just reviewed. And specifically, I want to elaborate on my disappointment with the way it appears to ignore the goals of those jurisdictions that selected Bright Choice as an effective and immediate way of reducing their city's carbon emissions back in 2018. For example, Oakland, Fremont, Emeryville, and several other jurisdictions took a significant step to address their emissions by selecting Bright Choice as their city's default. However, by 2019, their progress in reducing emissions was eroded, as was shown on table 3, I believe it was, where Bright Choice emissions intensity went from 101 to 135 pounds of carbon dioxide per megawatt hour. And then in 2020, bright choice emissions intensity increased again. And it's difficult to say how great the increase was because the report avoided showing year-by-year emissions intensity for bright choice from 2018 to 2030 using either of the mentioned accounting methodologies. But if I refer to table 3 of the report, which there are actually 2 table 3s in the report. So this is the second table 3. I think it was slide 7. I estimate that the emissions intensity for a bright choice went up by a factor somewhat greater than 4 in just 2 years. What we don't know is how long it'll take under the proposed pathway for bright choice emissions to return to the levels that they were in 2018 and 2019. I certainly don't know, and I suspect that as a board of directors, you don't know either. So I have 2 recommendations for the board. First is ask staff to upgrade or revise table 3 of the report to include bright choice emissions factors so that everyone can see how this proposed pathway impacts the carbon footprint of bright choice cities and bright choice customers. And then secondly, if you are a bright choice jurisdiction and you're serious about reducing your carbon emissions, I recommend that you consider changing your default to renewable 100 so that you can achieve 0 emissions in a known timeline. Thank you very much.
Thank you, speaker. We'll take the next speaker card submitted.
The next speaker card was with Chris Gilbert, but I don't believe Chris is in attendance, and the speaker card had it noted as comments only. So we can either go to live speakers or I can read the comments, whatever you prefer.
Would you please read the comment into the record, no longer than 2 minutes, please?
Great. Laura, if you want to pull up the timer, I can.
I'm trying to get that up. For some reason, it disappeared on me. I will do that as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, I think this comment will be relatively short anyway, so I'll just start reading if that's okay. As one of the initial 100 EBCE residential customers, I question whether it is credible at this point to propose a path to 0 emissions in 2030, since EBCE's emissions have been going up, not down. According to a recent analysis of 2020 power content labels for the various CCAs and IOUs in California, EBCE is the 2nd highest carbon emitter in Northern California with about 600 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour versus 160 for PG&E. Other CCAs range from Peninsula Clean Energy at 13 pounds per CO2 per megawatt hour to Clean Power SF at 40 to Sonoma Clean Power at 80, all way below EBC. According to the staff report tonight, between 2018 and 2020, emissions went up by 2/3. What is to convince me and other consumers that a path to 0 emissions by 2030 can be realized if emissions are going in the other direction? What will assure us that we won't do more backsliding? Finally, what is to convince a consumer concerned about climate change that they shouldn't just change back to PG&E given that PG&E's incredibly lower emissions? And that is in the comments from Chris Gilbert.
Very good, and I will leave it to the clerk to call in order the folks with their hands raised.
I have, let's see, Tom Kelly.
Tom, I've unmuted you.
Thank you. You know, where to start? So many of us spent years of our lives trying to get the CCA off the ground. And one of the driving forces for me personally was a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. In 2018, the board set a benchmark of 142 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. And in 2019, they reported that the emissions were actually at about 101 pounds. So it looked like we were going in the right direction. Well, lo and behold, it doesn't really matter which one of these measurements you look at, whether it's PSDR or TCR, the emissions for bright choice alone are out of control, essentially. And we knew it was coming. AB 1110, which changed the way these GHGs are measured, was passed in 2016, and everybody, every load serving entity was aware of that change. Obviously, the other Northern California CCAs opted to get rid of their PCC2 recs and focus on California recs instead. It's really quite discouraging. And I'm going to tell you, I would I second Richard's comment about cities changing their default, but I would also recommend to cities like Stockton and any other city in San Joaquin County that's interested in joining a CCA to think twice about joining EBCE. The moment they join, their emissions will increase by 2 or 3 times over PG&E. And frankly, you know, if somebody started a campaign pointing that out, I think it would actually put EBC at risk, because people want you to do something about climate change, and that is not increasing emissions, it's eliminating emissions. Thank you.
Jessica Tovar is next.
Hello, Jessica Tovar on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I want to emphasize that we advocated for, there's a lot of background noise.
Sorry, Jessica, folks, can you make sure you're on mute? If you are not speaking, the only person speaking right now is Jessica, and can we give Jessica some additional time, please?
Thank you. I appreciate that. East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and I just wanted to uplift the whole point of our advocacy for the local development business plan, of which the Board of Supervisors granted $500,000 for that study, was so that we can have a plan moving forward of how to integrate clean energy programs and sources of clean energy and storage locally over the next 10 years of the program. And the whole point of that is to address, you know, not only the economic benefits, but also to address the resilience. And true clean energy really is when it's in your community and you can see it, versus relying on remote sources, which are not resilient forms of energy, and oftentimes, even though they're labeled as clean, are oftentimes not. So I just want to really uplift the importance of the local development business plan and actually doing that infrastructure in Alameda County and Tracy, so that we can actually clean up our mix, as opposed to just, you know, moving numbers around and slapping a label on it. That doesn't really do anything. It's not transformative. The other comments from East Bay Clean Power was the recommendation is East Bay Community Energy following the proceedings on distributed energy resources through the CPUC. And so that's a question. Thank you. Clean power to the people.
Thank you. Next will be Alita Dupree.
Thank you again, Chair Diane Martinez and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her. This is important and it's complicated, but I think that we can use this as a motivation to push toward a greater level of renewables, ideally the solar and wind, that are both in our community, but there is also a place for being connected to the rest of the grid and the rest of the region. Because I maintain to you that EBCE should not be an island. There are different levels of documentation with renewables, and California has adopted their rules. In the past, in my own usage, I would buy unbundled renewable energy credits, and they did satisfy for me having renewables. Oh, I got noise here again. Now I have.
Hey, Mike and Newer, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
Now I have solar coming in that is mostly local in nature. So I think the theme of what this can be about is what I call additionality, in which we can add the resources, especially the storage even. Because I think we can build storage a lot more quickly than we can build new generation. For us to show a level of renewables that is connected more closely to our organization. So let's use these numbers as a way to promote new and better things going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Seeing no further hands raised in the attendee box, we will bring it back to the board for discussion. And I'd first like to recognize Chair of the CAC, Anna Olivia Eldred, for comments pertaining to how the CAC discussed this item.
Thank you, Chair Martinez. So first, I went to check a prior CAC meeting for this item, knowing that our minutes have not been posted because of staff issues, which are fully understandable, but discovered that the video recordings of these meetings have also not been posted since late last year, and we do need to get those posted because those are public records, and I can't check our old meetings, and either can anyone else. So even if we don't have minutes, those do need to go up. The PowerPoint presentation was also not made available to the CAC, and so as a committee, we may have missed some things, but after seeing the presentation tonight, some of those issues were addressed, except that I again heard we had planned on having nuclear power, and now that we don't, our projections are dirtier. We were very clearly informed that we never intended to have nuclear in our mix, and that we were accepting the allocation as a pass-through only, with plans to sell the energy. And when we could not find a buyer, we decided not to take it in the future. So if perhaps staff can follow up with me after the meeting as opposed to during this time, so that myself and the other members of our committee and the public can have that concern addressed and gain clarity. So the CAC would like to see a roadmap for how we achieve these numbers, and what is intended to be included in the carbon-free energy. There's a strong need for local renewable development, energy efficiency, energy conservation, and other methods of demand reduction, as opposed to disproportionate reliance on remote renewables, some of which we are now building out of state. And in looking at the chart, which again, we didn't get to see before, I did see a declining reliance on large hydro, which is fantastic, but still it's making up a significant amount of our carbon-free projections. And we'd like to see a risk assessment of relying on this large hydro, especially as capacity is not going to expand for large hydro. It is likely to decrease given both drought conditions and increased demand for large hydro in not only our state, but places like Oregon that also are increasing their carbon-free energy mix, where the energy does originate for quite a lot of our stuff. So that is the summary of our comments.
Great, thank you, Chair. Next up, we have Member Harrison from Berkeley.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to just make sure I understood some of the public comments. What we start with here is a chart about the percent of renewables and carbon-free, which shows Bright Choice and a combination of Bright Choice and the other plan, all plans, which was 3 and now will be 2. But then we get to a chart on the emission factors that combines those. So what I would like to see is an emission factor chart specifically for Bright Choice versus Renewable 100. It helps our customers make informed decisions. I think the percentage of renewables is a little harder to grasp in some ways. I think it's great. It shows this upward trend, but I don't think we should have one that's more specific and then one that combines everything. So I'd like to ask that we get that at a future meeting. I also have a question about what these numbers on the emission factors assume about the customer base, the allocation between Bright Choice and Renewable 100. Does anyone have any comments on that? Does it assume the current split between our cities? Does it assume more people coming on to Renewable 100? What are the assumptions there?
The emissions projections, I think reflect a current view of Bright Choice customers. So we can't project that there will be more cities at this point that will opt to go for 100% renewal. Obviously, if that is the case, that will change our overall emissions factor because we'll be having more customers on 100% renewables. But this reflects sort of the current state.
I will note that it does reflect the cities that have committed to renewable.
Okay, thank you.
That's right.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, so it does
Okay.
not
speculative
project other cities joining.
in the future.
So Berkeley,
For
you're
example.
reflecting, what are you
Correct.
assuming about Berkeley? You don't know where people are going to end up. How do you do that? We haven't done it yet.
We are assuming a significant percentage of the customers do transition to Renewable 100, and there is an assumption. I believe it's maybe 5 or 10% of the customers assuming that they do end up opting.
And if you look at our experience,
Okay.
our other communities,
Okay.
there's no community that's more than I think 11 or 12% that have opted down. So, even if Berkeley were to experience that, it overall would not have a significant effect on overall emissions with a small number of customers.
Okay, that's very helpful. So it assumes all the cities that have already committed, and it includes commercial customers that we've committed in October, for example, in our case.
Yeah,
Yes.
all the known formal commitments we have
Okay.
assumed do transition with some modest, sort of offset that may transition
Okay.
to the Bright Choice. Correct.
Okay, that's really helpful. I read in the memo that because this new methodology, the PSDR, includes unspecified, an emissions factor for unspecified. How do you do that since it's unspecified?
It's an average. It reflects an average of the emissions of CAISO energy, right? So if you think about that, the energy mix, the average energy mix includes emitting resources. And so it sort of reflects that kind of average energy mix.
Okay.
It's a standard disclosed number that CAISO does provide.
Okay, that's great.
So we're not
And
doing our own calculation.
And did our share of unspecified go up when we made this change of Bright Choices mix?
Unspecified did not change with the sort of transition to PCC, the treatment of PCC2. The change in unspecified happened when the board elected to stop incrementally buying large hydro.
Right. Okay. So, I moved to a different topic. So when this decision was made between 19 and 20, our unspecified went up, correct? Okay. And I think I look at these three factors together. What's the renewable and carbon percentages? What's the percentage by type? Unspecified, nuclear, if we had that, large hydro, et cetera. But then emissions by plant. I really think that's important to my constituents, is they want to know the emissions for the Bright Choice plan under the PSDR methodology. So can we get that next time as opposed to that being a blend?
Really quick, sorry to interrupt you, but that is in the memo on table 2.
Okay.
So there's a table 2 Bright Choice emissions factor.
Okay. And is it over years, or is it down this memo?
Yes,
it
is over
setup
years.
that we have for the other one that we showed. It's not in the PowerPoint presentation, but it is in the memo.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will go back and look at that.
When
So,
you asked for the emissions for Renewable 100, that is of course 0.
right, of course. Yeah, right. And then is there anything about this that has to do with, are there any other factors? So there's the change in the mix that we had. There's the not using nuclear, which I heard the Community Advisory Commission committee say they're concerned about that because when we took the nuclear, we said we weren't going to consider it. We were just taking it to sell it. So is the nuclear in these earlier years, even though we weren't going to use it?
No, it is not. We've never taken it.
There was never a nuclear, we've never accepted a nuclear allocation. The only accounting for nuclear in our mix has been, as we've talked in the past, there have been trace amounts of nuclear in ACS, large hydro, that we have bought.
So did I miss that? That is my last question. Did I miss something in the presentation? It sounded like that was one of the things that happened in the reason why we look dirtier in 20 and 19.
It's a relative, if you think about, I think the reference is if compared to say a PG&E, the reason a PG&E looks so clean is because they have a very significant amount of nuclear. So if we're comparing ourselves to PG&E, we can't really compare ourselves when they include 45% of their energy mix for nuclear, and we obviously have 0%.
Okay, now I understand.
That's not an apt point of comparison, because our communities and our board have deemed nuclear not to be a clean energy from our perspective.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Harrison. Next up is Vice Chair Lopez.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the report. And thank you very much for the Citizen Advisory Committee, the CAC, weighing in. A lot of what was weighed in by the committee, that definitely resonates, and I'm in agreement with. Actually, I would like to see a roadmap and understand how we're going to get to this 100 number in 2030. It's unclear. I mean, what I see basically is a scaling of this, but I'm of the mind, I mean, we're just starting 2022, and we've accomplished quite a bit since the inception of the JPA launch. And I'm wondering how we are able to promote ourselves up to 100, renewable 100 sooner than even the 2030 goal, which would, of course, be, I think, optimal. And so what I'd like to hear is, if it's not, already ready for today's item, but in the future, really, what are the roadblocks? And then how can we, as EBCE, look to help with those roadblocks? And how can we package a message perhaps better to residential customers that may want to do this? I think that has happened already, but for some reason, I think that people may still be confused as to why it would be good to do and what's involved and so forth, because it's not really happening the way you'd like to. Of course, I would never impose, my own opinion on my sister jurisdictions here, but I do hope that we can all together get there with that renewable 100. And we can all, work on our city councils and our internal stakeholders, our business community, our residential communities to get us there, even before 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Next up is Member Monroe from Livermore.
Hi, so I'd like, just really nice segue. I too wanted to speak about the communication piece. I found this appropriate for this group, but as I was thinking about it, I was thinking about, well, part of my job as a city council member is to translate this stuff to my residents. And I don't think I'm competent to do that, honestly. This is complicated. It's, I keep saying I have been on here long enough that I should stop saying this, but it's still complicated. And yes, it was a deep dive. So what I'm wondering is, just as when EBCE was starting, there was a huge push to enroll people. Is this worth the time and energy to do the same thing for explaining this push to zero emissions? There's two reasons for that. One is If people understand, then they can, as Vice Chair mentioned, as individuals move up. But also, Livermore has not opted up yet. And I've talked with our staff about that. And because we're in the middle of doing a climate action plan, this fits in with this. So our timetable is going to fit with our city's need to make this happen organically. And I'm wondering how not only we can work with individuals, but and I know this is part of my job, so I mean, I'm not trying to get out of that, but how can we all work together? And again, I think this goes back to Vice Chair Lopez's comments to bring the systemic nature of this forward. So I hope that was clear. Anyway, I'm done.
Thank you, Member Monroe. Next up, we have Member Kalb from Oakland. Dan, you with us? All right, he might have stepped away for just a moment, but I will recognize you as soon as you get back. Just pipe up. I'd love to make my comments. I'm wondering if someone from staff would be able to enable me to share screens.
Yes, let me do that.
I think you should be able to, at least I thought you were able to, so.
I think I am able to, it's just not, let's
I'm
see.
gonna make you a co-host.
Okay,
You are now a co-host, so you should be able to share screen.
okay, give me just a second and let me see if I can do this. And Zoom is asking me to do something, so it might not let me, but let me try closing this. And okay, desktop 2. Let me see if this will work. All right, are folks able to see this desktop with a little
Yes.
Word document? Let's see if I could zoom in a little bit. This is just a way I was framing things for myself so I could think about what the biggest levers were on our carbon intensity. And I'm not trying to make any comment on what we should do as a board at this point, but I just wanted people to think about the fact that the decisions that we make as a board do not happen in a vacuum. And on top of the changes with the reporting methodology that Jim explained, I thought that this might be a way to illustrate what he was talking about on slide 7 about not accepting nuclear into our portfolio. But these are what I see as the biggest levers when it comes to affecting our carbon intensity. And just, it's one of those charts where you get to pick 2. So you get nuclear, no nuclear, and the lowest carbon intensity will come with a higher cost. No nuclear and a discounted rate will come with a higher carbon intensity. That lowest carbon intensity circle, it kind of represents direction that we have given to the board, which is 0 emissions by 2030. So we kind of, we have to understand that accepting nuclear or trying to have a discounted rate, that those are going to affect each other. And this doesn't even include the levers that were brought up tonight in terms of local versus less local renewable development. But this is one way that I've been thinking about it. I'm going to stop sharing screen now. But we do have, I think, some work to do in the future, but I just wanted to make sure that folks, are cognizant of, first of all, I appreciate Member Monroe's just mentioning that it's a deep dive. There's a lot of acronyms that we have to wade through to understand that the reporting methodology has changed. All of us who represent counties and cities, we're familiar with accounting standards that we see changing from year to year in our cities as we are in charge of our city's finances. Well, in the energy sector, those methodologies change as well. And so numbers will change, But then, the propositions that we've always had and that we've worked with to educate and bring along our communities are often pegged to PG&E. So, when we're doing those comparisons with PG&E, we want to be able to use apples to apples, but when things are up in the air, things do get more complicated. But I just did want to highlight that the decisions that we made around nuclear do affect our ability to lower that carbon intensity when we're having a direct comparison to our competitor in this case, which is PG&E. Again, not commenting on what specific direction we need to go in. I just want to kind of put a lens on the conversation that we're having. And now I see Member Kalb is back, so I want to cede the floor to him at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, my computer froze a minute ago. First of all, thanks for the presentation, staff, for putting all this together, and for the members of the public who reminded us about this challenge. So we've been from the very beginning, we have required ourselves to have 5% more eligible renewables than PG&E, or that they're more than they're required to do under the RPS, and we're continuing with that. But where we're having this challenge is the other clean energy set of portfolio, I guess you'd call it, where because in part, or in large part maybe, because of PG&E's Diablo Canyon, we don't have that same clean energy or greenhouse gas free mix that we have intended to have. I guess the question I have, this came up in a previous meeting, and I think someone mentioned that today, one of the public commenters, that some of the other CCAs are doing better than us in terms of their clean energy mix beyond the eligible renewables. And I'm wondering, do we know why that is? Are they charging their customers more, therefore they have more money to buy more large hydro? Are they accepting some nuclear? I don't think we should accept nuclear, but I'm wondering, are they? I think some are, but some aren't. What are the differences with our neighbors CCAs around the Greater Bay Area?
Sure.
And why are at least some of them doing better? Do we have that information? And then the last question I have to staff is, if in the very near future we were to change our Bright Choice commitment, which is now 1% cost less than PG&E, and go to a 0.5% or half penny cost less, how much more dollars would we have to purchase more clean energy to improve the challenge we're facing here?
So let me speak to your first question there, Dan, about other CCAs. I think it's, I'm not going to list each specific CCA in the specific circumstances. We have evaluated it, though. So yes, there are CCAs that have accepted the nuclear allocation. That has a meaningful effect. There are a number of CCAs in the Bay Area who are priced at a premium to PG&E. There are CCAs in the Bay Area who have elected to pay for large hydro out of reserves, and instead of paying for them, in current year revenues. So that probably gets you, the entirety of what's going on is, either you're paying for large hydro out of reserves, you've accepted the nuclear allocation, or you're more expensive.
Okay, and then what's the marginal, what more can we gain with available resources for clean energy in our portfolio if we were to go from 1% to a 0.5% less than PG&E?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what that is. I think it would be, estimate of, single digit increase of large hydro purchase. So it would not be a significant increase in our in our
Could you,
procurement.
could you get that to us maybe at the next executive committee or next month, just to have that
Yeah, I certainly we can let you know what I think that the challenge to be able to tell you exactly how many megawatt hours, it sort of depends, but we can say, this is what it's worth, a half a percent change, and you can give some estimate. But my expectation is it would be it's going to be a fairly small increase in renewables procurement.
Okay, I'm just trying to piece together a solution here, over time.
What I'll just sort of note in terms of solution is we are procuring to 100% renewables, or clean energy rather, for Bright Choice over the next 8 years. And, an increasing percentage of our customers are on 100% renewables starting this year. I think, as we've heard, more communities will be considering that as we go forward. Given the need that we hear from jurisdictions to continually offer a discount product that has good clean energy characteristics and 100%, I would say that the best approach to move more quickly is for more cities to make the decision to default to 100% renewable. That's obviously not a decision that we can make. That's really incumbent on city councils to
Great. I think Nick might have frozen for a second. Did you have your questions answered, Member Cal?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Next up is Anna Olivia Eldred.
Thank you, Chair. So I actually wanted to address the kind of diagram that you put up with the interlocking circles. So that can be true, but it is not necessarily true. So there are other ways to reduce carbon intensity that don't cost more money. And I mean, quite a few of them. Almost everything that falls inside of the energy efficiency kind of realm actually results in cost savings and in some ways makes us money, right? So there are lots of ways to reduce cost and not just procure our way out of something, as opposed to really looking at a whole, I mean, it's like an entire tool chest of methods that we can use to achieve higher levels of decarbonization, as opposed to higher levels of procurement of carbon-free energy. And so it's important not to conflate those two things, because the one pathway means we just have to keep buying stuff, and the other way really looks at how you maximize benefits to our communities that not only reduces carbon intensity, but also increases things like resilience and lowers the number of blackouts that we have, and increases the number of local jobs, and improves health outcomes for all residents. You can target like disadvantaged community members. You can target communities of, that's no longer the term for it. You can target like equity impact zones. You can target those kinds of things to increase health impacts and public benefit in that area, but it doesn't have to be that chart that you just put up. And so I really want to encourage us to look at it from all of the tools that are available to a program like ours that can do things differently and have had great success in doing them differently. That I think is the biggest component there. And then in the whole state, isn't it only 2 or 3 CCAs that took the nuclear allocation? This is from memory, so it's questionable, but Pioneer took it and they took it to sell it, and they also couldn't find a buyer. And then San Jose took it. Silicon Valley might have. Triple CE took it, but then reversed their decision. So like the majority of folks have not, this has not been the path that they've taken. And I don't know about them paying for stuff out of reserves that I don't have access to their finances that way, but there are a number of pathways that we can take, especially as we focus on, if we look at that local development business plan as the road that we laid out to say, how do we lower our costs, lower our carbon intensity, maximize benefits to our community members. And it is possible that with PG&E using nuclear power, that their carbon-free load may be higher, but if what we are demonstrating is a better product for our communities and they see it, then we won't have this kind of backlash.
Thank you, Anna Olivia. I'll just take a moment to respond and say that my chart in no way is comprehensive and does not cover every lever that we have at our disposal. But in my opinion, these are the biggest levers that we have that are affecting those numbers that have folks up in arms. Again, I'm not even saying that there's a specific direction that I'm recommending, outside of the fact that we do need to just understand that not accepting nuclear does affect our carbon intensity, as is demonstrated on the charts that we were presented with. And I do think that I am trying to, as was brought up by other members, just understand and realize that our value proposition, we've always had a discounted rate that we wanted to offer folks to, bring them in to the world of CCA. And that can be working in opposition with our desire for the lowest carbon intensity, which we've set out for as a board, and I 100% agree with, but we need to kind of reconcile those things as a board and decide, do we need to continue down this road, having it all? We're trying to have it all. And I agree, we should explore whatever programs we can to get to 2030 at 100% renewable. But we have to recognize what the big levers are. Next up, I will recognize Member Harrison.
I wanted to reiterate what Board Member Monroe had to say about needing materials that I can use to translate to people, because this is the way the conversation goes with my constituents. You're upgrading us to 100% renewable. I went and looked at Bright Choice as an alternative. Then I see that it has almost the same emissions as PG&E, which we know is not true because of the nuclear issue and everything else. And I'm going to go to PG&E. So that decision point is what matters. While we do an upgrade, that's when people start to look at all this. They're not out there looking at PG&E thinking, I'm going to get out of EBCE. But the moment of upgrade is a bit of a tension point. So I want to be able to talk about, I went back and got your table too, and I see the emissions by the PSDR for Bright Choice, and then I see them as a summary over here for everything. I'd like to see it for Renewable 100 so I can talk to people about that. I think that would just really help me with making that case. And I also wanted to reiterate what Ms. Eldred had to say, but I think this community choice aggregator is doing a lot of those things. They are doing things around, for example, the block power. They are doing things around charging. They're doing a lot of these things already. So I think that, we need to sort of talk to our communities about how it's not just about the immediate emission changes, but about the fact that investing this money locally with us means your communities are going to become healthier, are going to become more energy efficient. And I think that got a little lost in our conversations in the past, that keeping this money local is a good thing, because then your local people will be making decisions that will help you. And I just hope we emphasize that more and more as we go along. So thank you very much.
Appreciate those points, Member Harrison. I think those are, I think a lot of us are thinking about how we will continue to market EBCE into the future. And I think you raised good points. Vice Chair Lopez.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I do think that we could have our cake and eat it too. I think we went with that when we launched the JPA. And I'm wondering, especially since we have an agenda item coming up and we could potentially have even broader reach and even more influence in terms of how we procure power. because our service area could grow substantially. I'm wondering, this question is for Nick, is it possible at all in how, and when we procure power and we go out into the market, is it possible at all for the renewable energy to come in under, and we're able to offer rates still below those of PG&E? So, you know, the 5% was a really great sales item when we first started. You know, a lot of people thought, yeah, it's cleaner and it's cheaper. Can we still go with that somehow and say that we're still cleaner and cheaper? And so, yes, we can be cleaner, but if we can be cheaper, then I think we would reach the critical mass. And so that has to be, I think, something that we have leverage. We're big, and we're on the front end of a lot of things. And I think we need to go back out into the market and say, you know, we need to get this cheaper than at the premium that we currently have, you know, per household of whatever, $2 to $4 per household. If we can continue to sell the same story that we have originally gone out with from the get-go, I think that this story can continue to be attractive, and we can continue to get the other 8 jurisdictions in the fold. So I think the responsibility here is how we negotiate as a CCA and how we procure power. I do think that procuring power is the primary way to get ourselves out of it. And I thank you very much for the comments about, you know, there's other ways, but the most impactful way, really and honestly, to do this before or in time for our aspirational goal of 2030 is to procure our way through it. And we just have to, I think we have to be really bold. I think we have to be brazen. I think we have to go forward and say, this is our vision. This is our power, and we flex our muscle out there in the marketplace and get better rates for our ratepayers. Thank you.
Just to the question that you had, Vice Chair Lopez, at the scale that we would need to procure renewables and over time, at this time, we cannot offer 100% renewables at a sort of structural discount. You know, that's just not the pricing dynamic. You know, to get California renewables, it's going to cost what we charge. And, you know, I think as we are building many of the projects we have signed up, our hope is that cost will come down. And, you know, we have some evidence that our cost of renewable energy is going to be meaningfully lower once we have the solar and wind projects that we have caused to be built online and operating. And they are certainly helping to manage our overall costs of procurement and help us to continue to offer, you know, a discount to customers. But in the near term, I'm afraid to say that our very best efforts are not enough to allow us to offer all of our customers 100% renewable at a lower cost.
Of course, I mean, I appreciate that, but I think we're talking about a time frame of 2030, and I think, you know, as we cause these projects to happen because we have the demand for it, as we continue to grow our service area, or even have our existing service area really have a push. You know, I'd like to figure out, well, what can we do? Like, where can we come in pricing? Even if we're not at a discount, can we be on par with PG&E? And you know, so these are things like I said earlier, my comment sooner was, I really want to see, and I think this needs to come back as an agenda item, a deeper dive, and have some more analysis. What is our path forward to getting there? And you know, we see the percentiles, but how do we actually implement that vision? And I hope that we can continue to be creative. We have been very creative. I think I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and we just have to look for solutions here, so that our story is better than anybody else's story.
Can I make a couple statements to respond to that?
Yes, please, Howard.
So maybe I want to just do a quick screen share of this table that we've already seen, or that was in the presentation. I think, we're really focusing on sort of bright choice and kind of the road to get to 100% carbon free by 2030. I want to respond to Vice Chair Lopez's comments there. This is a fairly high level presentation that we provided to show sort of a road to increase our renewable energy percentage year after year until 2030, going from sort of current year at around 45% as an estimate up to 75% in 2030. Our view is that's a very ambitious level of renewables increase. And I don't want to lose sight of that. I know we're being very critical as a community, as a board and staff, that we want to do more and we want to do it more quickly, but this is very extreme growth, especially when you compare against the RPS percentages. We're at a 6% overage here, surplus relative to RPS here, and we're going to 15%. And some of the challenges we're talking about in terms of procurement are very significant in the coming years. There's huge supply chain challenges. There's huge interconnection challenges. To get a solar or wind utility scale project permitted and built takes, probably 4 to 6 years at age if you're starting from scratch. So I think we're trying to be very ambitious in laying out a schedule to get to 75% renewables and 100% carbon free. And certainly we welcome more dialogue on that. This is not a, hey, this is the schedule, let's walk away and that's it. This is us trying to put more detail into I think the board, adopted resolution that really set this number. And we're trying to show step by step how we do that. And we're working day after day on an IRP plan, integrated resource planning process that does all of the analysis in detail that we're talking about here. And that was that was certainly presented as the basis for the board adoption on 100% carbon free. So that's something that we do every 2 years, and we're doing that this year. We're currently actually revisiting the IRP analysis. So we're absolutely going to take more materials forward to the board, explain more detail here. But this is well informed as well. This is not just us saying we're just going to throw some numbers up there. We are carefully analyzing the different technology resources and such.
Thank you. I just want to chime in here. I mean, what I'm saying is, okay, you're saying the market isn't doing this, and I understand this is a very ambitious scale. I'm very happy that this is where we're trying to get to. We're way ahead of the state schedule even. But what I'm asking really is how we make 100% renewable energy more competitive. And I'm asking what kind of leverage we have. And sure, if it takes a while for those capital projects to happen, whether in state or out of state, 5 to 6 years, I just want to have that. I want to have a path to get there, and see how we're getting. Now, again, I think we still have another agenda item. I'll stop here. I think we could take it up again, but I'll just say that my aspiration is really to get us, where we can feel confident that these goals are not necessarily just aspirational in nature, but we have a clear set of, and we're not just having policy directives, we have a clear set of tangible way of getting there, and just to get
that. And that actually is embodied in the integrated resource plan, which is a document that we prepare every 2 years, and we actually have to submit to the state of California. What I would say is we are unable to provide that to you and this board until such time as we've completed the integrated resource plan. But that is the level of detail at which I think we would expect you would want to see the plan, and it speaks to specific types of resources, quantities of contracts, and provides that very, very in-depth specificity. That's something we're going to be completing between now and the summer. So by fall, we'll be able to provide an update on our latest consideration of what the integrated resource plan is. I'll just say on bringing the costs down. If you recall, just last year we issued a clean energy revenue bond. We were the first agency in the nation to leverage the clean energy revenue bond model for renewables procurement. So that is very likely the best tool we have to structurally bring down the cost of renewables for our customers. And I would, I'll say we are literally the leader in the nation when it comes to doing it.
Very good. Good conversation tonight, colleagues. Is there anyone else who hasn't had a chance to make comments tonight that wishes to do so?
Yes. Yes, this is Teresa Cox Fremont, City Council.
Yes, Member Cox, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the report that was presented tonight is good for us to know as directors and evaluating the plan. I think that I'm looking a little bit more for some simple data in terms of being able to communicate to those that are not on the renewable plan. Number one, we're always looking for cost savings, which I agree with our Vice Chair Lopez. I think that my concern right now is the way that Nick had mentioned about the supply chain impact. That's not letting up for the next year based on some of the forecasts that I've been able to review. And my concern is that we're locked in, right? That these contracts that are in the portfolio, they are locked in for the next 15 or 20 years. Is that correct? Or 10 years? Did one of the city staff just confirm how long in these contract portfolios that we have is the longest time period? 10 years? What's the average? What's the average contract time period?
Average is about 15 years, but they range between 10 and 20 years.
Okay, that's what I thought. And part of that is that a lot of this is all dictated by the economy. And my concern right now is that pulling forth the data to show that there is achievable cost savings. I'm struggling in the part of just trying to make that happen, and I'm getting 8 to 15% increase in what I'm seeing in some of the industry normal contracts that we normally do. The uplift because of the logistics, because of the supply demand on all these different materials worldwide have impacted our economy. And so, when I think of like trying to talk and have someone converted as the councilwoman from Berkeley, Harrison, I'm thinking like, okay, you're going to sit there and talk to someone and you want to show cost savings, how it's going to be competitive from one package with EVCE compared to PG&E. The next thing is with the climate, it dictates health. Like for this month, Black History Month is focused on Black health and wellness, right? And part of that is having that picture that you're going to be living in a more healthier environment because of adopting to the renewable energy, and what are the health benefits in doing so, and capturing some of that data to be able to demonstrate that, because most people only have a few, the first 30 seconds, 3 points, simple, and just showing a little bit scaled down on some of the charts to show how the benefit, what's in it for the consumer that would be willing to adopt to go into the renewable energy plan. And, it's always about the money. It's always about health benefits, and it's for the future generation of the next generation. We're trying to preserve the climate and adopting in this renewable plan, which is more of a environmental social justice type aspect of it. And so I know that there is some confines in how to quickly accelerate the results. To basically, we have some bragging rights for all of the directors to share with our community to increase adoption to the plan. But I'm a little concerned in terms of the timing of everything and how this is going to play out in this first year, coming in or out of the pandemic, and where the supply chain still has not picked up to the same level as pre-pandemic times. And there's a enormous burden that's being passed on to other industries and their consumers regarding the supply chain impact worldwide. So I'm just kind of proceeding and hearing what everyone is saying, and I hear everyone, and just kind of let's take a pause for a moment and see what would be the best ultimate time and recheck, whether it's the pricing, if we're locked in already. Is there a clause in the contract talking about price review that we can look at and see if those that we signed the contracts with, are they able to go down to resourcing some of this? We're locked in with the main primary supplier, but looking at their multiple levels of suppliers that support this, how can they see if there's some resourcing? But it's going to take time for Nick and his team to even go through a major looking at all of these different contracts and analyzing all the different things that come up. And so it's just the timing could be a little bit off right now in trying to achieve some sort of better pricing in that arena, but also pulling together some health benefits and things like that the community can relate to, and that it's also for the future generations. I mean, those things kind of monumental with, some strong points, just suggesting and trying to understand this whole scenario, and just kind of articulating it back to see if it's really, how realistic can we get there, and the different steps to be able to be successful in getting more to adopt. But I'm just a little wary right now on the timing based on some of the information that I've. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cox. I'm glad you brought up the importance of messaging, and you and Member Harrison brought up the non-monetary benefits that EBCE is bringing to our communities. I think that's an important story. When the block power contract gets signed, we will be issuing a press release, and I hope staff can forward that to the board for us to share with our communities and any associated coverage that we get, because those are, as we have gained our sea legs as an agency, we start having these stories to tell, and that is how we reach people. It's our job to jump in and look at these very intense charts. But then, we need to get back to the community and meet them where they are and speak their language and let them know what the benefits of EBCE are. But good conversation tonight, colleagues. We will have a lot to think about as we even explore our next topic on our agenda. And seeing no further conversation from the board, we can move on, but this was a good conversation. So next up, I'm sorry. Someone talking? Oh, Teresa, if you're able to mute yourself, you can press *6 if you're still on your phone. And the next item up on our agenda is the possible expansion to Stockton and San Joaquin County. I will cede the floor to staff for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, so this is also a discussion item. Lori, can you, there we go. Thank you. Can you advance to slide number 3? Okay, so this is starting giving an overview of how we got here with Stockton, and then we're going to proceed. So really for almost the last year, Stockton has been evaluating the potential for participation in a CCA. They conducted a feasibility study. That feasibility study was presented to their council. While there were general interests expressed, there were some concerns raised about the risks and costs to the city of launching its own agency. That initiated some dialogue with EBCE staff and some of our board members that culminated in a meeting, a presentation that I made with Mayor Martinez and Council Member Ariola to the Stockton City Council during their study session. At that meeting, after our presentation, the Stockton City Council directed their staff to work with EBCE to explore Stockton and our Joint Powers Authority. Next slide, please. So here's some key stats about the city of Stockton. City of Stockton has 320,000 residents, median income of $54,000. City of Stockton has much connectivity to Alameda County. This is an interesting stat, actually. It is has the largest percentage of any city in the country of super commuters. So the share of Stockton residents who commute from Stockton into Alameda County and beyond. Certainly a reflection of the connectivity of the city of Stockton with Alameda County, and certainly great connectivity between the city of Stockton and the city of Tracy, where we serve. The city of Stockton would represent a 22% increase in our load were they to join, and a 14% increase in our total number of accounts. Next slide, please. So why Stockton? I've articulated some of these points, but one really important one is this idea of continuing to expand access to community choice to the Central Valley. One of the persistent critiques of community choice is that CCAs only serve wealthier coastal communities. While we know that not to be true, opening community choice access to residents of the Central Valley is an important sort of step in bringing the benefits of community choice, of clean energy, of local investment to those communities, but also reflects politically the totality of what CCAs can do in serving all Californians. Yes, we are also serving the city of Tracy, so there's a logic that if we were to, Stockton were to seek to join a CCA, joining the CCA that already serves the second largest city or one of the largest cities in their county makes a lot of sense. There are currently no CCAs that serve, there are no counties where there are two CCAs operating. So there's no instance where you have two CCAs both operating in the same county. So we think that there's some real logic to if Stockton wants to join, and we can run the numbers, and it makes sense from a financial and clean energy procurement perspective that we would want to welcome them in. Next slide, please. And when we think about strategic priorities, one of the other reasons why Stockton is potentially such an interesting addition to East Bay Community Energy is its role as a goods movement corridor. When we think about local economic development, we think about reducing both global greenhouse gas emissions, but also the really pernicious sources of local air pollution and all of the detrimental things that come from pollution. It's really from transportation. We know that the transportation sector is what drives the worst air quality outcomes in the Bay Area. And so transportation electrification, particularly of medium, everything from light, but particularly medium and heavy duty goods movement is really, really critical. And when you think about the electrification of medium and heavy duty goods movement, it's really about network effects. If a truck that picks up a load at the Port of Oakland does not have a place to charge, both in the Port of Oakland or adjacent to the Port of Oakland, and also at the logistics center where it's going to drop off its goods, then that trucker will not elect to electrify, or that fleet operator will not electrify. And so if we think about goods movement corridors, it's really from the city of Stockton that also has its port through the city of Tracy down to the Port of Oakland, represents one of the largest goods movement corridors in the West Coast. And so being able to have that continuity of service and the continuity of infrastructure development that we might pursue or partner to develop is really critical to achieve our goals of transforming the transportation sector and electrifying it. Next slide, please. Politically, integration with Stockton also, makes sense. If we think about representation in the state assembly and the state senate, the city of Stockton, the city of Tracy share a state senator and a member of the state assembly. And so we think about expanding our sphere of engagement in Sacramento, being able to say that Senator Eggman and Assemblymember Villa Padua and whoever may represent those communities in the future, the majority of their district is served by a CCA is we believe quite valuable. Next slide, please. So as we think about Stockton, I think as we consider expansion there, we should also have a conversation about expansion to cover the totality of San Joaquin County. If you think about the four largest cities in the San Joaquin County, you have, just gonna go to the, with Modesto, Manteca, Tracy, and Stockton. The city of Modesto and the city of, the city of Lodi. The city of Lodi and city of Modesto are served by public power agencies. And so as a result, they're actually not eligible for participation in a CCA or that wouldn't really be something that happens. So with Stockton coming into the EBCE JPA, where we'd find ourselves is serving the vast majority of eligible San Joaquin County load. And so taking that next step to work with the city of Manteca and the County Board of Supervisors to integrate unincorporated San Joaquin would be a logical step and would not really actually significantly increase the total number of customers that we serve if indeed we were to bring Stockton into the mix as well. And then there's, so that's really what I wanted to focus on today was the expansion to Stockton and potentially, have a discussion about engagement with San Joaquin County writ large. But there's also a question I think we may want to start or we may want to table and really focus on San Joaquin County of how do we want to engage with other communities? Calaveras County, as an example, does not have a CCA. If Calaveras County came to EBC and said, we'd like your help forming a CCA, how might we want to go about that? Would we want to really focus on integration into our JPA? Would we want to focus on providing services? It's this idea of being powered by EBCE CCA, where the Calaveras County, as an example, would form its own joint powers authority, would have all of the authorities that this board has over their JPA, but they would retain East Bay Community Energy to provide professional staff to run the agency. Or there's a model of just very limited technical services, helping them select consultants to do feasibility studies and kind of being more of an ally as they pursue the community choice path. So this is our last slide, and this is just sort of a general sense of timeline. So in January, so last month, we requested some additional data from PG&E to do a thorough analysis of Stockton's load to be able to assess, do we feel like their load would create a meaningfully lower or higher procurement cost relative to our loads? We're going to complete that analysis, have some conversations with city staff and this board about that analysis. Then once the analysis is done, we would take that to Stockton City Council for a formal review, and then depending on the feedback we get, they would pursue sort of a two-step process to initiate joining our Joint Powers Authority. Then the EBCE board would need to approve Stockton's membership in our Joint Powers Authority. All of this needs to happen before December 2022 to allow Stockton to join EBC by the beginning of 2024. I will say that, again, pending feedback here, we would suggest that in parallel to the conversations we're having with Stockton, we may want to initiate some conversations with San Joaquin County to assess their level of interest as well. Indeed, if Stockton were to elect to join and the board were to vote yes to bring Stockton in, we'd love to have an opportunity to try to get the rest of San Joaquin County on board in 2022 so that we can start serving the entirety of San Joaquin County in 2024. Right, that is it.
Great, colleagues, any clarifying questions before we go to public comment? Member Monroe. You're on mute, Trish.
Sorry about that. Good, because I was trying to remember my clarifying question, which was you talked about no county being split between two JPAs, between two CCAs. Are there any how many CCAs have more than one county? And we already, besides us, because we already have Tracy. So, yeah.
MCE serves more than one county. Sonoma serves, Sonoma Clean Power serves Sonoma and I believe Lake County. Redwood Coast Community Energy serves Humboldt County and I believe one other county. I may be wrong there. Triple Coast.
Okay, I get the message.
Yeah, so yes, there are five or six CCAs that serve multiple counties.
Okay, and is there experience in working? Again, I understand that we too are among those, but what we're talking about is a more of an expansion. That I'm assuming that is makes the what has been their experience?
I haven't heard any issues with the experience. Yeah, no issues. I think the complexity, the only not issue that what I have heard is in some cases there are CCAs that have 40 or 50 member communities. That becomes quite a large board. And so in that case, what they will do is there may be a delegation amongst a group of communities to say the county to represent all of their interests.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and my intention wasn't to frame my question as there's going to be problems or there's not going to be. Problems. Just to try to get a sense of the context.
What I'll say is I believe the transition to remote meetings has made it much easier to have multiple counties in one CCA.
Great.
Previously,
thank you.
If you had to have everyone get together, it was a challenge.
Yeah.
Great. Colleagues, seeing no other questions from the board, I will check in with the clerk to see if any speaker cards have been submitted. And I welcome you to call those folks in order and then call the folks whose hands are raised among the attendees. And I will remind everyone joining us by Zoom that you can raise your hand in Zoom to be recognized, or if you're calling in, press *9. I'll turn it over to Lori.
Vaughn is has his hand raised. Vaughn, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes.
I think Stockton is great. One question would be, do you get all the county space between Stockton and here and Tracy? Because I don't know where the city is versus where it's county and not a city, like Castro Valley is not, quote, a city. It's part of the Alameda County. So would the EBCE be able to have domain or whatever you want to call it or service required for the whole area from Stockton through Tracy over to the Alameda border? That would be a question. If that's the case, or even if it's not the case, I think it's a great idea because Stockton and Tracy have lots of land where there's chances to put solar panels up. They have lots of sun, more than Oakland and the East Bay for that part. I live in Pleasant, and so we're actually in a different climate than those of you on the other side of the hill. And getting into the valley, San Joaquin Valley, there's a lot more sun than there is in the Bay Area. Thank you.
So
Next.
yeah,
Does
so
Steph want to respond briefly?
yes. No, Stockton is just the city boundaries. I think the expansion to those communities between Stockton and Tracy would require either the specific city to join if they are a city, or for the county to make the decision on behalf of unincorporated communities.
Okay, thank you. Lori, you can call the next speaker.
Tom Kelly.
Thank you. I think it was San Joaquin County that almost became the first CCA in California. So they were making pretty good progress toward it, but PG&E interfered in a big way, and it may have actually led to the California legislature developing a code of conduct for how the utilities got involved in the CCAs. So, I'm sure there are people there who are still very interested in a CCA. The thing I wanted to say, though, was if the city council were to ask me if they should join EBCE and right now, I'd have to say no. I'd have to say that if you're concerned about climate change, switching to EBCE will increase your carbon emissions fourfold over PG&E. So you're best just to stay where you are until EBCE gets it together and offers a default product that beats PG&E. The other thing I would say is that if that wasn't acceptable to them, that they should take Nick's advice, and that is to default everybody into 100% renewable. That would be remarkable. A city of that size, half the size of Oakland, would actually make a big dent in emissions here throughout the Bay Area. So anyway, I hope that we will get better and get better sooner. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jessica Tovar. Jessica, you're allowed to speak now.
Hi, Jessica, on behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I just wanted to say that we do support in the inclusion of the city of Stockton. I have been connected to the community activists who have been trying to get a community choice program through their city. And they had asked me, when that didn't kind of fell through, what I thought about them joining East Bay Community Energy. And just to highlight, this was mentioned the last item, but that there's all kinds of benefits in joining East Bay Community Energy. And that came about because of the advocacy of community to actually do more than just provide electricity, but actually invest in the communities over time. Stockton can use economic development. That is something that we've noted, and it is a very different city. So being able to bring economic benefits would be very important for City of Stockton. And then other thing I would like to emphasize is the continuation of the governance, including community members and advocates, because that is really what has made EBCE different and stronger. And even though we're not always on the same page, having this dialogue and figuring it out as we move along only makes the effort stronger. And we certainly would see it as an overall benefit to get them off of being provided electricity from PG&E, who is a known murderer in the state of California. That's all. Thank you. Clean power to the people.
The next speaker I have is Richard Rollins. Richard?
Thank you. I think I can be very brief, and I just wanted to ask for a clarification of both a slide comment and then something that you said, Nick. I think one of the slides said that enrolling Stockton would advance our mission, EBCE's mission of greenhouse gas or reducing emissions. And following the comment or the discussion we had earlier about bright choice emissions, I'm just curious about what assumptions underlie the comment that it would advance our mission of reducing emissions. I'm just curious, and the date also is interesting because it comes close to the date when Diablo Canyon is supposed to be closed, and I'm just wondering what the backstory is there. Thank you.
Would you like me to respond, Chair
Yes,
Martinez?
please respond, and we can stop sharing the timer because I don't see any more hands raised. We'll go ahead and close public comment, and we will take the answer to Mr. Rollins's question.
That comment around increasing clean energy is in reference to the fact that East Bay Community Energy has set a goal to achieve 100% clean energy by 2030, 15 years ahead of state clean energy procurement requirements. The question about 2024, that is a mandate by the state of California, or the California Public Utilities Commission more precisely, to that dictates that a new community may only join a CCA on a set schedule. So if they join us in 2022 and we've submitted an implementation plan this year, the earliest we could serve them is January 1, 2024.
All right, thank you, Nick. Colleagues, opening this item up for discussion. Does anyone have any comments that they'd like to make about the possible inclusion of Stockton and other communities into East Bay Community Energy? I'll first recognize Anna Olivia Eldred.
Thank you, Chair. So the CAC did not talk about this item, so I just would like to make clear that I'm speaking from my own perspective at this moment. But I have been doing interviews with individuals, community members, some sort of informal ones with other CAC members of CCAs around the state as part of my research. And by and large, folks are happy with having joined CCAs. The one kind of concern that I've heard is that growth to a certain point is good, but growth beyond that point is results in dilution of community voices. Like in a group that has a small number of participating cities, one small city's concern is it carries a lot of weight. But when that one voice becomes part of, say, 30, then it stops carrying the same amount of weight, and especially smaller cities with smaller populations of their voice can get washed out. And that they, again, individuals have felt that they wish they'd looked more closely at the reasons participating cities were joining and to see if their values lined up. Now, I'll say that I'm completely in favor of exploring Stockton joining. I think this is a fantastic thing. You could hardly get me more excited than talking about the possibility of electrification with port things. Like it's a wonderful concept, but that is the feedback that I've heard. And I think that as we look towards growing, that it's going to be important for us as a CCA to look at the reasons folks want to join a CCA, because there are as many reasons as there are communities that are joining them, and just making sure that our values are in alignment. So that's all. Thank you for bringing this to us. It's a great opportunity.
Great, thank you, Chair Eldred. Next up is Member Monroe.
Hi, I think I was one of the people, at least, who asked for this to be brought to us. I really appreciate this. Was a really substantive piece of information with some great ideas. I also, I'll speak to that in a minute, but I did want to echo Anna Olivia's concerns. I mean, this is one of my concerns also, which is as one grows, how do any organization grows, how do you maintain the ability to speak to the smaller groups within that community, to the diversity within any community? That's really what, that applies to this organization as much as it does to, again, any institution. So I'd be interested, as you go forward in exploring this, in understanding how that might be thought about, whether region by region. As I believe Vaughn said, Central Valley is somewhat different in geography, and Tri-Valley, which is different again from actually even north and south Inner Bay. I appreciate the move east because there is this tendency to look west. We all know it. I mean, I've talked about it before. I feel it myself. I tend to look west. I don't tend to look east. And I think the more that we make those comparisons, the more that politically we have those interactions, the more, again, that we experience a different kind of diversity, that extends beyond the goals of EBCE. I was really interested in the idea that we could serve as a model for other for other communities in the Central Valley. I thought that was just, in as much as we're doing stuff right, share the wealth. Why not? I think that was really one of the most interesting things. That as a spin-off of just the idea of incorporating Stockton. And then finally, as Anna Olivia said, this idea of doing the truck routes, doing the transportation corridors, and making it possible to deal with those transportation problems. I mean, yes. So thank you so much. This is looking really good, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
Great. Next up is Vice Chair Lopez.
Thank you very much for this item, staff, and also Councilmember Monroe for bringing it forward. I think this is a really great idea, and I hope that we do continue to look at this positively and give a nod here. Apart from being able to, in our previous discussion, be able to procure power in a better way or in a more fuller way, and have that leverage. This particular county is known as agricultural county. And many of you know that I'm a daughter of migrant farm workers. I grew up in an agricultural community. And one of the things about the whole renewable energy story that has happened along the way is that it's become something that has been attainable by more affluent communities, right?
And Member Cox, can you mute yourself?
Thank you. In this way, what happens is we're able to leverage what we have in our vision to a community that may not otherwise be able to participate in the whole renewable energy story, and sort of decarbonizing our world and getting out of the use of fossil fuels. We're able to, there's a whole other dimension here that for me, when I read on this in the agenda packet, that I found very appealing, and it's really on the where the intersection is on social justice and environmental justice can happen for this particular county, and that we can leverage what we know, our experiences, and provide that to a community that's obviously more impoverished. We could see that with the income levels, and also if you look at the ethnic demographic levels as well. And we can have people really participate in the way that we're trying to also do in some pilot in some areas within our own current service area. So I see this also as another additive thing to the overall story. And I hope that we will go forward with this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Next up is Member Ariola.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. As our only director from San Joaquin County, I really wanted to support this item. Thank you to Chair Martinez and to Nick for coming out to San Joaquin County, to Stockton, and joining me as we advocated for this item. And something that I really wanted to highlight for everyone here is that idea that we have a mission here. We have a mission statement. And I believe that all of us, you know, whether it's EBCE or it's whether the environmental justice movement moving forward is, and I can't remember when most stated it beautifully, is that we have an opportunity here to become a model for the future of renewable energy generation. And I think that as we move forward, this is how we set that standard. This is how we set the standard for leadership moving forward, showing that it can be done, particularly in agricultural communities like Tracy, like in Stockton, and throughout the Central Valley. And so I think if we're truly looking at our mission statement and what we want to do as an organization, this is an incredibly great step. And it is incredibly true that we do have a very different culture in the Central Valley. We do have different economic disparities in the Central Valley. And, you know, those are things where when we have those bigger challenges, we have greater opportunities to alleviate those challenges. And so I would very much be in support of it. And I look forward to continuing to advocate on behalf of EBCE and in San Joaquin County. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ariola. Next up is Member Marquez. Member Marquez, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry about that. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their previous comments. I was going to ask to hear your impression of the work session with the City Council, but I'm glad to hear from the representative Tracy and a perspective of San Joaquin County. I think it's really important that we move forward with exploring this option. I think the more people that we bring into our membership, we can help that disadvantaged community and just grow the good work that we're doing. And I really support jobs, and I like the port-to-port connection. So this is definitely something I'd be happy to support. Thank you, staff, for all your great work.
Great, thank you, Member Marquez. Member Jordan from Albany.
Thank you very much. And I'm not going to weigh in on the question directly because I feel that would be rather forward of me, given that I'm somewhat of an interloper here at the moment. But I will offer that if it is to be equitable, put on the table, perhaps changing the name of the organization to Bay Valley Community Energy. I think if it stays East Bay Community Energy, that is always going to sort of have a cultural impact in terms of the nature of the organization. So if the organization is going to expand into the Valley, I think it's important to recognize that in its branding. And I know branding is, you know, a big headache for an organization to change, but I think that's important for respect and to really have the community come in and really feel it's actually a equal part of the organization. With that, unfortunately, I have to go to another meeting. I have no idea. You all love to talk so much. I love to talk too, obviously. I will make sure if I'm in this position to get a plan better. Thank you all for your work.
Oh, Member Jordan, this isn't even a long one. We're doing pretty well. We're on our last item. But thank you for your comments. Thank you everyone for your comments. I think they were all very astute, and I think there are many benefits to bringing Stockton into the family. So this is an information item. I will thank staff for presenting this and thank everyone for weighing in on this idea. Next up is item 14. This is board member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future board agendas. Colleagues, any parting words or specific requests for individual items in upcoming meetings? Okay, seeing no hands raised, We will go ahead and move on to adjournment. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, March 16th, and the time now is 7:31 p.m. So thank you everyone for a very robust evening of conversation. And this is what we do. We do the hard work, but we've got a lot to think about in the future as we address our value proposition, our power mix, all of these things. They all are levers that pull on each other, and we need to think about everything in their entirety, not to mention the leverage that we could get out of growing our East Bay community energy family to include Stockton and other communities. So thank you to staff for all your good work. Thank you to my colleagues for the robust conversation and your willingness to always participate in these challenging conversations, and the charts. So look at the charts. Thank you for doing that. Thank you and good night, everyone. See you next time.
Good night. Thank you for your work, Diane.
Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
Diane.